What's up, guys? Welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. Today, we're going to be looking at my DAW of choice, Logic Pro X. I'm just going to do a review of all the stuff I really like about it and a few things I don't, but mostly what I like about it. I really like this DAW. First of all, I'm going to take a look at some of the plugins that this has and some of the sounds that you can get. So first of all, let's look at the drum kit designer. And I am a drummer, and I really enjoy being able to fiddle around with the stuff, and the sounds on this are very good. So here's just a basic kit. Got a MIDI keyboard down here. Got all the different velocities. The thing sounds really nice, and what you can do too is if you click on a drum, you can change all sorts of parameters so I can tune it to that, or I can go down super deep, dampening, and the gain. The snare here, I really like this snare right here. And you can tweak pretty much any other parameter there is imaginable. And they got a bunch of presets too of a bunch of different kits you can try. And then I'll jump into effects, actually. I'll process this in a few different ways with the different effects they have built in. So they have a bunch of delays, and I'm just going to show you the basic echo, so you just get fairly standard, and you get a few other delays that you can use as well. Sample delays, cool, stereo delay. And move on to distortion. They got a nice bit crusher and downsampling. And one thing I like about this is not only you can get some nice 8-bit kind of video game style sounds, you can also get some pretty sweet distortion like that, some grit, and then you can adjust the mix so I can have it just a subtle grit versus no grit. Adds a nice little bite to it, and I really dig that. And then it's got two distortion plugins. I usually use, it's actually got a bunch of distortion plugins, but I usually end up using Distortion 2. And that's also got a mix knob. And there are a bunch of different stuff you can... That's really loud. Bunch of different parameters you can mess with there. And then for dynamics, they've got a ton of stuff. A de-esser, which is very nice that they have that in there. Enveloper, expander, which is pretty nice. The limiter, multipressor, noise gate, and adaptative limiter. I'll get to that in a little bit. And then the compressor. I have this set with really low. I'll turn it back up here. Fairly standard compressor, although the cool thing is you have multiple circuit types, so that will change your sound. So let's say I go with the VCA. Crank the ratio here, and then lower the threshold. So you get this insane over-the-top compressed sound, and what you can do is go to the mix knob, and then dial it back so you have this like a parallel compression, so you get... And then you can also sidechain the compressor to pretty much anything to get the pumping and whatnot. And see, after the compressor, we got a fairly standard EQ. Not really much explanation needed there. I don't really use much of the filter stuff in here. Imaging stereo spread, I use this one a lot. Doesn't really sound that great on drums, but on synthesizers and sometimes guitars, it's really nice. And then some... direction mixer stuff, metering, modulation. Got some cool stuff in here, like the flanger is pretty nice. And they got a phaser. I'll just show you what they got in here. Chorus, ensemble, flanger, microphaser, modulation, delay, phaser, ring shifter, rotor cabinet, scanner, vibrato, spreader, and tremolo. And then pitch correction. I'll show you a different way to do pitch correction. This is more like an auto-tune, automatic kind of thing. And I prefer to do it more like the Melodyne, where you actually have the notes on the piano roll and you can move them, but I'll show you that later. And a vocal transformer, this is kind of fun to play with. I can't really think of any time that you actually use it, but it's fun. And then a pitch shifter, I use that every now and again. Kind of cool. And the pitch shift, it has that weird delay thing that you heard. It's still... I don't really know why it does that, but you can adjust the delay here if you want, so it'll... But you can't go any lower, so... I don't tend to use that a lot. It kind of messes with your sound a bit, and I don't really like it. The reverb has some great reverb stuff. So this is N-verb. I'll go one of the. You get some trippy sounds with this one. Just some kind of weirder stuff. And then usually I'll either use Space Designer or Platinum Verb. And so that's what this sounds like. I'll bump up the wet so you can really hear it. You can adjust the spread. I'll go through a couple presets here. Big room. And the one I've really been enjoying lately is the room reverb. That was really big. I'm gonna jump up the reverb here. Woo! So a lot of different stuff you can experiment here. It's got a whole load of presets as well. Small spaces, warped effects, medium spaces, large spaces. You can put in like a large church or a tiny studio room. Pretty much anything with this. I really like this reverb. You can do all sorts of cool stuff with it. Specialized exciter. This is pretty cool. You can add some harmonic content. That's obviously overboard, and we can use the frequency and get some interesting effects with that. And then speech enhancer is kind of cool. I've not really used any of the others of these. And then utility gain with the standard phase invert, balance, and of course the gain, all that jazz. And that's it for effects, pretty much. So I'll take you through a few of the other instruments. So let's look at a different drum thing. This is Ultrabeat. This is just the default kit on here. And there's a ton of parameters I've not even explored yet on here. But, for instance, you can tune. We'll make this something a little noticeable. C1. I actually use this a lot as a sub-kick. And I just tune it to what I need. So the sounds in Ultrabeat, the kick and snare sounds are not amazing, especially the kick sounds. The kick sounds in here, I typically don't use. Usually I'll use a kick sound from someone like Freaky Loops. They have some great kick samples. And the snare sounds I'll use more often, but the kick samples are always just a little weak sauce. Kind of stay away from them. They've got a lot of great kind of hi-hat and percussion elements in here. That's what I usually use this for. They've got a ton of kits in here, so I'll say I find Techno 808. It's actually a 909, but whatever. And it would take me a long time to go through all these sounds, and so I'm not going to demo a whole lot of them, but they've got your typical, like the 909. So yeah, the snare's pretty good, but the kick just doesn't do it for me. Some claps. I use the 808 clap all the time. And then they have this great feature, too, where you can do drag and drop samples. So say I have a pack of drum samples that I want to be able to just map out to my MIDI keyboard very quickly and very easily. And for that, I can just hop into Ultrabeat and drag samples in to right here, and then just play it like any other thing in here. They got all sorts of stuff. Oh, and then they also got, if you go a couple octaves up, you get some kind of weird bass or synth sound. Sometimes they're awesome, sometimes they're kind of lame. I don't use them a whole lot, but it's a fun thing to at least play with. Try to find some interesting sounds. So that's Ultrabeat. And then the B3 organ, which I really love their B3 organ. I'm a big fan of that sound, of B3 organs in general. And they've got a pretty nice one. And here's a couple. What's the one preset I really like? Oh, it's a bit more open. There's a ton of stuff that you can tweak, ton of parameters that you can mess with on that, and I really dig that. And then the sampler. Going to the sampler real quick. Just show some different ways I've used it. I've used it to... For instance, I did a remix of Dylan Francis remix of Deadmau5's Some Chords, and for the drop, I actually chopped it up and assign different keys to different little parts of it so I can play it out on my MIDI keyboard like So if you're into like hip hop and sampling stuff, this is a great way to do it. There are a bunch of tutorials on different ways to use this thing. And then you can also bring in samples to have them be pitched up and down. I have this 808 snare. You can go way up. And that's a really handy tool, especially if you're doing like trap and some forms of hip hop is really, really nice to use. And then you can just chop up samples like vocal samples. Where are you? All sorts of different stuff you can do with that. And then you've got your tuning. And I'm sure this can be automated too. And then the other nice thing about this is I use this a lot when tuning kicks. I'll bring a kick sample into the sampler and then just tune it using this. And you always do want to tune your kicks, by the way, when doing EDM, because there's so much sub bass that the bass will conflict with the actual bass. And you never want that. Then there are a crap load of synthesizers in here. I mostly use the ES2 and the Retro Synth. Those are the ones I typically use. And if you want to hear what those sound like, in pretty much all the music I do, I use the Retro Synth and the ES2 almost exclusively. Every now and again I'll use an external synth, but that's relatively rare because I'm a broke high school student, you know, making music with what I can, and so I'll usually use these. And every now and again I'll use a couple other synths in here too. Like they got the FM synth, the polyphonic, monophonic ensemble, all that fun stuff. Modeling synth, which is alright. Then clav, electric piano, bunch of different instruments. They got like any instrument you can think of. So I'll hop into here. I'll delete this. Just open up a new software instrument in here. They got a bunch of nice presets too. And so they got like a bass guitar. If you hit it hard enough, you get different velocity, and you can get some like finger squeak, and you can control how much you get of that. The guitar stuff in here is not very good. I almost never use it. That's the harmonics. Imagine that would be better with some kind of reverb it's really in the background, but I almost never use these. Got a lot of cool orchestral elements. They're not mind-blowingly good, but they're pretty good. I've used them before. So we got like your French horns. Give it harder. And that's really pretty good. I really enjoy the sound of that. And then the harp, I use this one quite a bit. That's a pretty good sound. So we got orchestral kit, it's pretty sweet. Got a bunch of just random sounds. And there, timpani, xylophone, pipe organ, strings. Go through the strings real quick. And the cool thing about these is if you open this, you can adjust a few different parameters like the reverb, have more or less. And then you got legato, staccato. And tremolo. Which sounds kind of tense. Some woodwinds. I don't tend to use these a lot, so. Some pianos. I actually really like the pianos in here, especially the Yamaha. It's got some nice sounds. I'm not sure. I'm not actually a legit pianist, so I'm not really sure how this would sound. I'm sure it would sound awesome with a legit pianist behind it. Go a little lower. Go higher. You can adjust all the tones so you can get a little more muted sound here, the ambiance. You can. I also really enjoy this one. It's a bit of a different sound, and the Steinway's pretty good too. A ton of stuff that you can adjust there. Then I'll go to the synthesizers in a second, and some arpeggiated stuff. I'll show you the MIDI effects in a little bit, but it's got some great arpeggiators and other things of that nature. I already went through these. So synthesizer, I'll show you a few presets that they have. Here's a bass. Just the cutoff here. Then this is on the ES2. I use this preset quite a bit, actually. Some chords. Don't really like the chord trigger, so I'll take that off. It's much better if you're doing chords yourself. The chord triggers tend to do weird stuff, and I tend to not use them. Some cool sounds there. We got some leads. Show you a couple others here. Phantom Rock lead. Power lead. And there are a ton of other sounds I don't even... Oh, and pads. Pads. Lots of pads. I use... If I can find it here. Massive Transpad, here we go. This one quite a bit. If you adjust the attack, pull down the release, pull down the delay. Get a pretty massive sound there, and if you layer it with octaves and whatnot, sounds pretty sick. I'll go back to this lead for a second so I can show off the amp simulator a little better, because this one actually sounds pretty sweet with an amp simulator. And still, bear in mind, I am not a guitarist or an expert on anything related to it. So let's try this one. And then another cool thing you can do is, so you can go through all sorts of the heads and cabinets and models and then the mics too. You can choose the mics. So let's go for SM57 classic guitar mic, and I can even choose the placement, and you can hear how that changes the tone. And I do enjoy playing around with this, although I have mostly no idea what I'm doing except for moving the mic around, because that's my area of expertise. So there's a ton of stuff in synths, and I'll show you the ARP. So I'll choose a different sound here. So what I'll do, go to MIDI effects, go to arpeggiator, and right out of the gate you can get ton of stuff you can do with that, and that's just a quick little demo. And you can even program in pretty intricate stuff if you want. A transposer, scripter, randomizer. And so that's a pretty comprehensive demo of a lot of the sounds that you can do in Logic Pro. The only other thing I want to go over is the workflow. Depending on how your brain works and how you like to work, you'll either love or hate the workflow. Like, for instance, for me, I'm the kind of guy who will sit down with a MIDI keyboard, play in something, then add another track, and noodle around, find stuff I like, and then add some more. And I tend to work very quickly that way, and which is great because creativity usually comes in very short bursts where you're just super in the zone, and that goes away pretty quickly. So you want to get all your ideas down very quickly, and then also this got a great stuff for once you get that idea down quickly, you can bring it to life with all the great sounds that are built in. And then you can also you got automation and all the other workflow stuff. And for some people, that's, not intuitive. For some people, they prefer like FL Studio, which for me, that's a totally alien way of working, and it makes no sense to my brain. I've used it before, and I'm just like, how do you wrap your head around that? But for some people, that's their quickest way from their brain to their sequencer. So it just depends on the way you work. And I've also seen people who go in and just, create a MIDI track and then put in MIDI notes and just program everything as opposed to playing stuff in, and they seem to have that work well for them as well. So this can be used in a lot of different ways. And also you got loops, which I tend not to use these a lot, but there's some stuff in there that can be like inspiration for melodies and whatnot. And I every now and again I'll use like a percussion loop kind of subtly layered in with the rest of my stuff to add some interest, and then type stuff in the notes. All right, that's all I got for today. Hopefully you guys found this helpful, and hope you decide whether or not you want to go with Logic, which I do highly suggest that you do, but that is entirely up to you. I do electronic music every single week and a making of video every single week as well, and that's all in Logic. So if you want to be able to hear what kind of stuff that Logic can do, I use pretty much Logic plugins pretty much exclusively. And so you can hear that, and then in the making of videos actually see the program in action to see if you like that. And I would appreciate it if you guys would subscribe. I do a new song every single Monday. And that's all I got. Peace out.